I used to run, so I worked in treatment for 9 years. I worked in a young people's team for 4 of those 9 years. In fact, I ran a young people's team for 4 of those 9 years and would do loads of work. I mean, to me, addiction is a mental health problem, right? If it's not a mental health problem, I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know what fantastical model someone wants to create that doesn't understand addiction as a mental health problem. So I spent a lot of time working with young people and managing teams that were helping young people overcome and battle with addiction. And in the complexity of addiction, often young people or adults will experience like other mental health issues as well, right? So they might have anxiety, depression, or whatever label you want to put on it, but they'll be struggling with other stuff. So I spent a lot of time learning therapy sessions and ways of helping people directly with that, ways of teaching staff to help people. I've done lots of groups with young people, you know, kind of talking and speaking about issues around addiction and drug use, and done lots of work in partnership with like CAMS services, and all sorts of stuff, like even from like youth offending teams.
Is there kind of any shocking statistics or any reoccurring issues that you see among young people who suffer mental health issues because of their recreational drug habits?
I don't think it, well, I don't know about statistics, but I think the thing I noticed is it never helps. Although it does help and it doesn't help, it depends how you define help, doesn't it? That, like, I guess what I noticed is that there are a large number of young people who are dealing with and battling with like internal problematic thoughts and using substances as a way of dealing with that, and it's really good in the short term that it distracts them, but often lots of problems in the long term. I guess the thing I noticed more than anything else is that there was always, whenever there was a young person in front of me that would have a problematic relationship with a drug, like their verbalisation of the problem would always make sense. It would never just be like, oh my God, I just don't understand why you're smoking weed every day, like this is crazy. It would never be that. It would always be like, oh cool, yeah, I get it. It's about your relationship with your dad and how your dad's treated you and how he's been abusive or how your mum's done X, Y, Z. Do you know what I mean? Like there would always be a story and a pattern that made sense. In terms of the stats around like, you know, what young people were doing and stuff like that, well, cannabis dominates young people's treatment in terms of a drug. Like, I think it was at the moment, it's like 80% of young people in drug treatment are there for cannabis. So the predominantly problematic drug with young people is weed, and then you get a bit of alcohol, and then the rest of it is normally just like other stuff, so it might be like some kind of stimulant or whatever.
So the NUS, you know, the National Union of Students, they launched this survey on student drug use back in February 2018, so last year. So they had 2,000 respondents from over 150 UK universities, and 1/3 of the students said they took drugs just to cope with stress, and 22% of the students used drugs to self-medicate for an existing mental health problem. So what do you think of it, and do you think there's a bigger, like an underlying issue here that people really aren't recognising?
I think most people consume drugs a large number of people, not just young people, just people consume drugs to deal with stress. If you think about most people's relationship with alcohol, people like drinking on a Friday night. Well, why Friday night? Because it's the end of the week. It's been a busy week, it's been a stressful week, and like you think, especially in this city, you think about like people just going for let's go for a drink. Like the inebriate, like the experience of drinking alcohol is naturally relaxes you, right? You can be like, man, it's been a mad day, I'm glad I'm having a few drinks. So like, I'm not surprised by 1/3 of young people saying I use drugs to deal with stress, and I think if anything, I would expect it to be higher if it was more of a dialogue than a question. Like if you just ask someone, do you use drugs to deal with stress? Most people go, no. Yeah. Whereas if you said, right, okay, let's talk about your drug use. You know when you take loads of pills at a festival, like does that help you escape from all that? So they'll be like, yeah man, festivals are just like a total getaway for like 3 or 4 days, so I don't have to worry about all that shit that's going on over there. And like, I would define that as getting away from stress. Whether that's a problem or not, I don't know. I think that's another debate and discussion in itself. I think it's okay to use drugs to change your experience for a bit because your experience is difficult. And I think that's what we do with most stuff. Like people that enjoy reading, think about someone that's like, man, I just love reading books. What do you like about reading books? Well, it's an escape, right? It gets me away from the grind of the day. Okay, cool. So it helps you deal with stress. Yeah, it helps me deal with stress. So like, I think most things that we do, most of our experience is about that. But the complexity of it comes with drugs are not like reading a book. They're not like doing yoga or going for a run or playing football or watching TV, whatever else, because they change so much. Like reading a book is pretty risk-free, right? Well, it depends what you're reading, but like, you know, if you just put the book down, that's it, you can do whatever else. Whereas, you know, the the impact of drugs on the body and your state of mind can obviously have much wider reaching effects. So for me, I'm not particularly surprised by the stats, but this for me is a need for young people to be educated more around the nature and the concept of addiction. So like most people go through their entire life not understanding the nuance of addiction and getting that we all use lots of things around us to distract from the present, and we all use lots of things to get away from problematic thoughts and feelings and emotions. And the drug user who's injecting gear or smoking spice, or the street drinker who's drinking 9 cans of special brew a day, is no different than the person who reads all the time. It's just their method. You know what I mean? It's different in their experience is different, right? You can't compare reading a Jane Austen novel to doing a line of gear or injecting heroin. Like I get that they're different, but it's still escaping the norm and the grind and giving the brain a bit of a break. And I think if we put more investment into educating young people about the nuance of that, then we would view drug use differently, and we would look more kindly and with more empathy upon people in Manchester who are smoking loads of spice, or the kind of guys and girls you'll see knocking around this street that are smoking crack. Like, we would have more understanding and go, man, they're unwell, like they must be really stressed, because like I just have to read for half an hour to chill my mind out. I could imagine what my life would have to be for me to need to smoke crack. But it's that same relationship. The person smoking crack because they're homeless and they're freezing and life's crap and they owe someone loads of money who's chasing them all the time, but for 10 minutes after smoke that crack they get away from it. But their stress is up here, whereas the book reader's stress is probably, I would imagine, far lower down. So I'm not surprised by it. If anything, I think it would be higher.
Yeah. Do you think then there is enough like mental health services specifically aimed at young people who kind of go through that motion then, who start off taking drugs maybe recreationally and it kind of turns into an addiction? Because I don't think most people actually recognise that addiction can start from a young age. I think, like you said, a lot of people might relate addiction to kind of homeless people or adults, but many people might not think of them as being younger people. So do you think there should be more services for younger people?
Yeah, definitely. I think there should be more services for adults as well, but like particularly focusing on young people. Like, drug treatment's vastly underfunded at the moment. The cuts to it have been pretty severe, and there's very, very little investment in youth services or diversionary activities for kids that are experiencing a problem. And for me, it's not always about like just having a drug service or a mental health service. I don't think that always works. I think models that are effective are much more wider reaching than that. So for example, we should have really well provisioned and equipped youth services, but train the staff on addiction, on how to manage those relationships. I don't think just having like a service that does mental health and drugs, or just drugs or whatever, is that useful, because until people understand that they've got an issue, they're not going to walk through the door. And until people have got the confidence to engage in the service, they're not going to walk through the door either, which is why treatment finds itself in the problem that it's in at the moment, because it's complaining all the time that it doesn't have enough money, but it doesn't have the innovation to get out and bring people into a service, right? It doesn't have the ability to go out and engage in youth services and bring people in. So I think, to answer your question, yeah, there's definitely an issue. We definitely need more stuff, but it needs to be a little bit more innovative and creative than just having a drug service for young people.
Yeah. The services then, that are treating these people, do you think they view young people who have mental health issues and maybe smoke a lot of cannabis, and would they view those people in the same way that they would view anyone else that has a mental health condition that maybe doesn't use drugs?
If you're asking, does a mental health service view a drug using young person differently to a non-drug user? Yeah, 100%. So like, I had lots of experience. Dual diagnosis is a thing, right? Like having a mental health condition and a drug problem. A major problem, which doesn't just exist with young people, exists across the spectrum, is that the mental health service will go, we can't work with them, they're using loads of weed and they're turning up stoned for our sessions, and like, until they stop doing that, we can't get in and address the mental health problem, which is valid to some extent. But then you get the same thing from the drug treatment service. They'll be like, well, we can't deal with them, they're really ill, like they've got really complex mental health problems and they keep turning up and not making any sense. We literally don't know what they're on about. And so you have this thing where the individual is like passed from the treatment service to the mental health service, treatment service, mental health service, and they bounce around. And there's lots of good research around how to tackle and deal with dual diagnosis, right? It isn't about bouncing someone from pillar to post. It's about like a dual approach of saying, we're going to address your drug problem and your mental health problem. But that is one of the nuances and difficulties with working with people who've got a drug problem, because it is really difficult to, if someone's getting smashed all the time on whatever drug it is, it's really difficult to get in and engage with their mental health. And you know, anyone who's had an experience of using drugs or knows anything about using drugs, it's not just about the immediate experience either. So if you've got a young person who's doing loads of lines, taking loads of stimulants or whatever, you know, and they smash it on a weekend, well, their head's going to be a bit fried for 3 days. So like if your sessions are near them going out, even if they're like, well, I've not done anything today, their mind state is their biochemistry is still going to be affected, and they're going to struggle to engage in some of those sessions you want to do. So unfortunately, like, it is an issue, and we do need to do more, and services shouldn't do that whole bouncing a kid around. But at the same time, we have to accept that that probably is one of the biggest challenges of addressing a problematic relationship with a drug. And furthermore, I think we get into this weird position where people will be like, oh, they've got a drug problem and a mental health problem. But I used to argue about people with this in addiction all the time when I worked in treatment. I'd be like, everyone who uses drugs problematically has got a mental health problem. Stop trying to like say, oh yeah, you've got the people with mental health problems and then the non-mental health problem people that are using drugs problematically. Well, if they're addicted, how is that not mental health? Like, I don't get the mindset of seeing someone who is compulsively doing a drug or doing a drug for XYZ, which is a thought that's a thought in their head. How is that not a mental health problem? So in some ways, I think the whole dual diagnosis thing of like labelling everybody off is a bit stupid and doesn't work. And I used to talk a lot about this in treatment, and it would really annoy people because ultimately you come down to the truth that drug treatment services should be mental health services, and drug treatment services should employ psychologists, psychiatrists, people with years of therapeutic training and intervention who aren't scared of engaging with a mental health problem. Because to me, behind the problematic drug use is a mental health condition. So what's the drug treatment service doing if it's not engaging with the mental health problem? Like, what is its actual purpose? And if you went into drug treatment services and saw the type of interventions that take place, a lot of them are, they're lovely. Like, I was one of these people, right? I went straight from uni to drug treatment. But when I left uni to work in drug treatment, I was untrained. I had no idea. I was just going in doing my best, literally just doing my best. And I was doing my best with some of the most complex people in society. Like, I can't think of a more vulnerable and complex group than street heroin users and crack smokers. Like, I don't think there's anybody harder to deal with than that group. But people were paid like comedy money just to go in and have a caseload of 50. That's not good enough. So there is a dual diagnosis problem, and like, it's okay to have that chat. But at the same time, the whole model to me is just stupid. And drug treatment services should be recognised as mental health services. They should be adequately funded, and there should be a pressure on drug treatment to employ people with therapeutic interventions, not people straight out of uni, whack them on like 17 grand and be like, you've got a caseload of 50 people. Like, what's that?
Was there anything specific then that made you want to go into kind of drug treatment straight from uni? Was there anything that pushed you to do that?
Yeah, a few things. Personal stuff with like family members having issues. That was one factor. A general curiosity was another. Like, a fascination with how drugs influence behaviour was another thing. Like, I also wanted to be in the police, but then did my degree and thought, I don't want to be in the police. So then I was like, what other stuff could I do? And then sort of like just went, I thought drug treatment looks like fun. And then just like was lucky to get a job as an interventions worker, and then just over 9 years just worked my way up to a manager.